Okie doke, it has been a while. I haven't posted a video in a bit. So today we are going to go ahead and talk about Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 8. I've played both of them previously on the channel. Resident Evil 7 I did finish, but with Resident Evil 8, circumstances changed, so I was unable to finish it on the channel. I do plan to go back and actually replay both of them, so I'll be doing that here soon. But this is my collective thoughts on both games. I was able to remain unspoiled from the time of my last episode up until the point I finished the game, so the ending was in fact a surprise for me. Don't know how I managed to do that, but I did. On top of that, I have some words about the games and some changes I would suggest making. Obviously, this is an opinion piece. I won't be doing that in my opinion thing constantly throughout the video. I respect my audience enough to know that this is an opinion piece because look at the title. Now the title is clearly a joke. I quite love the games, but I still want to go ahead and go over everything, so let's go ahead and get into it. Obviously, moving forward, spoilers ahead, let's go ahead and get into this. So to start out, I want to go ahead and go over 7. I don't have a whole lot in the way of critique on 7. Unlike 8, I feel like 7 is mostly fine in terms of pacing, content, and mechanics. Most of my biggest complaints come from characters, and the bits of the pacing and the mechanics that could use some polish. I don't really feel like I have enough to discuss on those specifically, since most of 7 for me feels very well paced. So I'm going to go ahead and go over the characters and just what little bits here and there I have for the rest of the game. So starting out with the villains, the Bakers and Evie are about as developed as they need to be. They serve their purpose in the story quite well, and I have no real changes I can suggest for them. In fact, I quite like them. They feel very real to me. As someone who knows people like the Bakers in real life, I do actually enjoy the monster personalities as well as the human ones. I have had neighbors in the past who are very similar to both versions of the Bakers, and having grown up in the South, all of their section feels very real to me, both from the decay and the home left in disarray, as well as the slingshotting personality between reasonable, sweet Southern hospitality and absolutely chaotic, like, drug addict feeling. I do know real people like that, and I do think the Bakers are very well characterized in that regard, and I do think they're very well used to hype their boss sections as well. I know the mechanics on certain sections can get a little tedious, mostly with Lucas and a little bit with Marguerite, but I don't have much I can suggest to fix that, aside from just small adjustments on pacing. For most of the game, the mechanics don't bother me. I quite like the pacing and mechanics for a bulk of the game. The one complaint I could make is the molded need to be utilized better, but given that they're a half-baked hack bioweapon made by a child, I don't really mind how ineffective they are. One thing to remember is that Evie was manufactured as a bioweapon, but her creations are not. She wasn't properly trained on how to use her abilities before she crashed the boat, so her creations being less effective than her makes some sense even if you're just looking at 7 and taking into consideration the info we get in 8. Evie is basically just a partial, less powerful culture copy of the Black God, so I don't have much I can complain on in terms of the Bakers or Evie, and even with the molded, I can understand why they're that ineffective and not necessarily the scary part of the game. Moving past the enemies, looking only at the characters of note we get in the game, we're gonna go ahead and go over Ethan, Mia, Zoe, and Joe. I'd like to start with Zoe and Joe. They're both about on the same level as the rest of the family for me. They only get as much characterization as we need, and even if you're taking the DLC into account, I think they're very well done. Joe is actually my favorite character, and he has my favorite mechanic in the entire franchise. I love that old man, and he is unironically my favorite character in the entire series. And yes, I know about Chris. I don't like Chris. I've never really liked Chris. Hush, stop your comment. Yes, I know Chris can punch boulders. I get it. That's not what makes him cool. What makes Joe cool is that Joe is just a guy. He's just a normal Marine. He's not a secret soldier. He's not a STARS member. He is just a regular Marine. And like, yes, the Marines are absolutely strong. I have many Marines in my family. Like, Marines are strong, but they're not in the monster exploding when you punch them level of smackdown that Joe is. I love Swamp Hobo Uncle, and he has kicked Leon Daddy Kennedy out of my top spot. But for Zoe, she's largely a plot device, both for Ethan and for Joe. I like her. My only complaint is we didn't really get her as a real companion. That makes sense going into the rest of my critique. Now, stepping away from Zoe, I'm going to go ahead and go over Mia. It's no surprise that I don't like her. I made several comments about that during my initial playthrough of 7. 8 made me like her slightly more, but that's not saying much. Really, I think she suffers from the game trying to hide her behind a wall of mystery in the beginning. See, the scenes we get at the start, the videos are back to back, and I think they would benefit from being framed differently. You could start us with a few short clips from Ethan's phone, basically framing the scene that he's going through his gallery. Similar to the first one, give us a few quick glimpses of what Ethan is fighting for. The biggest flaw with Mia is that she doesn't feel like she's worth going through all the trouble that Ethan goes through just for her. I need everyone to understand she is his motivation. Mia is and remains his entire motivation for the whole of 7, and I think she should be given more weight as such. If this was done, I do think my complaints about her would largely go away. Her attitude, lies, all of it would be acceptable as plot points if the story made her feel like someone Ethan really loves. Even if she definitely doesn't deserve the effort, him loving her justifies all of it. He's clearly a my wife kind of guy, and I think we should see the parts of her that make him love her. Just add a few pics, video clips before the second video we see in the opening where she's on the ship. Everything else could be the same, and that addition of those extra scenes would make it make sense. Give us something to hold on to for Mia that makes all of the violence and the horror that he goes through actually impactful and makes sense for how much he loves his wife. Not just in that Mia is his wife, but that she's a person he feels is worth fighting for. And finally, moving on to Ethan, it's no secret that I largely think Ethan is a moron. It's most of my commentary from my series doing Resident Evil 7, but it actually isn't an Ethan problem. It's a lazy writing issue. See, usually with horror, there's a degree of suspension of disbelief. It's what allows certain parts of the plot to happen, and we don't think too hard about the real-world approach to certain horror scenarios. However, with 7, the opening is very grounded, and this is where they mess up. With how most Resident Evil games start with 2 protagonists, they should have had the call at the start while he's driving be a conversation with his friend physically in the car. Ethan suffers from stupid city person writing, and as read by someone who grew up in a place exactly like Dulvey, you don't go into those places alone. Ethan is too smart in other parts of the game for me to believe that he would go into a place like the Bakers by himself. So to fix this hole, just put his friend in the car, have them have the same conversation, add a line as they pull up to the house about Ethan having called the cops in the area and them not taking the situation seriously, brushing him off, and show that he actually called and that they were unhelpful at the start. Give him a reason to have had gone to the house himself, and let everything proceed similarly. Have Ethan boost his pal over the fence and go into the guest house while Ethan finds a way around the back. All of that entrance going past the car and down through the swamp, going underneath the saw blades, all of that can be the same. And then when he gets into the house, he can't find his friend. Have everything play through the same until you get to the dinner scene where you find his friend and Jack kills him before coming at Ethan with a knife. This gives him added personal motivation as well as subverting the usual 2 protagonist format Resident Evil games give you. You go in expecting to be able to split off to the friend's perspective or to Mia's perspective, but neither of those things happen. You spend the entire game with Ethan until the very end. And from here, the entire game can play out as normal until the cop shows up. And then once the cop shows up, all you need to do is adjust the dialogue here to include him recognizing that Ethan is the guy who called. Once the cop is killed, it just adds another body to Ethan's conscience. Between all of this and adding the added information with Mia, they would fix both of my character problems with both Mia and Ethan. And I would even say the rest of the game can be largely the same up until the part where you have to fish the key out of the cop's body. I would maybe swap that with his friend, or maybe make his friend a mini-boss, something in the dissection room to give that section more oomph. Besides that, giving him slightly more lines about Mia in a loving way, letting him really get into the my wife guy core of his character, the game can largely be the same. Just give him a friend in order to eschew the going alone issue, make more, contact with the cops to eschew the why didn't you call the cops issue, and give us more on Mia so that way she feels like an impactful character for Ethan in a way that justifies all the hell he goes through for her. That's my biggest issue with both of them, is that they don't feel like this situation makes sense for them as a couple. Those changes would largely take away my complaints. That's about all I can say for 7. A few character additions, some dialogue adjustments, minor things that would make Ethan and Mia feel more alive and make all the effort feel worth it, making the logic of the situation make sense in a real way. That's about all I could ask for to just make the game perfect. It's still my favorite Resident Evil game and probably will be for a long time. Now, let's move on to 8, the real bulk of this video. I've got a lot to say here. I do enjoy the story and characters, and it did give me more respect for both Ethan and Mia. However, I do feel the game suffers from how empty it is in both terms of mechanics, locations, and interaction. So this is how I would pace everything out to fix these issues without changing the core story. So looking at the intro scenes, there are a couple things that we start with. You have the recap section remembering Dulvey, and then you also have the information you find in the home, and then you also have the intro scene revolving around the storybook. So with the Dulvey flashbacks, expand on that. Instead of just giving a recap with a few short blips, show us actual scenes. Cut to Ethan and Mia, show them getting pulled out, show Chris helping. Show, don't tell. Show us. Give us them in the hospital after Dulvey. Give us them packing. Give us Mia being pregnant. Give us Chris going over military training with Ethan. Give us all the work they put in to moving to their new home, to resettling into a life and rebuilding their marriage and dealing with everything after Dulvey. You don't have to take too long on it, but show us those moments. It's the same thing as the beginning of 7. Show us what Ethan is fighting for. It's not just Rose because she's his daughter. It's Mia because she's his wife. It's the life they just spent time rebuilding. Show us all the healing that they've done, all the real work that they've done, all of the effort he's put in with Chris, and show us Chris so that the friendship they have at the end of the game feels impactful. And more to that, give us clips of Mia acting normal. Show us how Mia usually acts so that the scene after the storybook is more unsettling. You can't pinpoint it right away, but you can see it on a second playthrough how weird her actions actually are, and give us more of that to compare to in the beginning of the game so that when you do come back knowing the Miranda situation on the second playthrough, you just feel it more. Give us more. The beginning of the game is good, though I do feel they focused far too much on the storybook rather than the actual characters they're setting up. I do like the storybook scene, and I do think it should be kept, but it should be after the Remembering Dulvey scene with the addition of the information showing us the life Mia and Ethan have put together. Not just remembering Dulvey, but showing the life they fought hard to get. Giving us those scenes to compare with early game will come back around in the last scene to make it more impactful. Very similar to the changes that I suggested in 7, just give us more of them as a family unit and as a couple. All of that build up will just make the scene at the end of the introduction when she does get shot hurt more. And yes, I know they have all the photos and all the information in his office, but for the story they're setting up, watching it works better than having to go read everything. Having to read everything is telling us. Having to watch it happen is showing us. And the relationship at the end feels more genuine when you've shown it to us. This goes for Mia and Ethan, as well as Ethan and Chris's friendship, as well as Mia and Chris's relationship at the end when there are these emotional moments about Ethan. They would feel more genuine if we had the context at the beginning of the game, so that you go into everything in the village knowing what was just ripped away from Ethan and having it feel full and alive. It takes like 5 extra minutes to establish these things, and I think it would be far more worth it to lay a good foundation for the 3 of them as your main characters. Once all that has been established, you can have the whole storybook scene play out, play most of it all the way up until the car crash pretty much the same way. Once that foundation for the impact has been set, it makes everything much more intense. You can set all the emotions up so that the storybook feels foreboding, that moment with Mia getting shot feels more impactful and painful and less of a shock factor, and once you've established the loving family unit, the betrayal of Chris as a friend hurts. And all of that just ends with Ethan alone and freezing. After the wreck, you can have Ethan make his way to the village the same way as before, have a cold, dark walk through the woods, the rustling trees, walking past all these occult items and dead birds, the scene bringing up the feelings of him coming into Dulvey, coming up to the bloody ruined cabin, stopping to investigate it, going downstairs, hearing something rip through the walls above him, have all that tension building play out just the same. However, once he steps out of the forest and finds the village, it's not destroyed yet. The full carnage has not set in. Instead, he finds himself in a sparse but populated village where everything is largely the same, but there are people. It's not lively. They regard him with caution as he enters, stepping inside and closing shutters as he passes. Meeting the few people out and willing to speak and getting to know them, he finds out how tense everything is as he makes his way through. He realizes everyone is on edge and a bit melancholy. He hears whispers of loss and fear. Something is wrong, and he can tell it's something to do with the house he came through. Whatever ripped through it, something has been happening. Eventually, he gets to the church where he meets Luisa and Elena. There, they speak with him. He ends up doing a few short tasks, like helping to gather medicine for Elena's father, the old man who was injured in the scene in Luisa's house, have him be sick, but not injured just yet. Eventually, through doing these small introductory tasks, Luisa offers to let him stay at her home, and a few more tasks leading into the night, letting him get acquainted with the village and the people, gathering a few items, until eventually, winding down for the night, he speaks with Luisa over dinner, and she tells him that they heard a baby being brought to the castle late in the night. This would be an organic transition between the populated village into the castle. This would lead you into the vampires very smoothly. This situation sets him off toward the castle. He'll take some item requested from the village to Lady Dimitrescu, and this leads him to meet Lady Dimitrescu as well as her daughters, all of them perfectly normal, wearing noble dresses, acting normally, maybe a few odd comments, but largely they're trying to keep up the facade at this point. However, Lady Dimitrescu knows who Ethan is, so she invites him in to stay without letting on that she knows. She does her best to try to keep him ignorant of the danger he's in, and of course, because he's looking for his daughter, he accepts the offer. She gives him a room, tells him to stay in the main social spaces and not to wander most of the castle. After being left alone, though, of course, he decides to roam and checks a few rooms, including finding the save room where the Duke has now shown up. This would be a good way to introduce the Duke and let him drip feed you information the longer you play and the more you enter his room. In this version, the castle is populated on the ground and upper floors. You meet fearful maids and serfs, pretty much all women, very few men in the castle, and the men who are there are very fearful. The women feel a tad concerned at the start, but the men are absolutely petrified. As we know, man-things don't last very long in this castle. But having all these servants here provides a sense of life to the castle, giving opportunity for establishing moments, letting Ethan overhear conversations, show the scenes that were discussed in the notes you find around Castle Dimitrescu. As Ethan explores, he finds the daughters and serfs interacting, maybe a few tad risque moments where he misinterprets what's happening. Really, it's, vampirism, but he's thinking he walked up on something he shouldn't have seen. Not entirely wrong. And all of this leads him into finding evidence of violence, and things slowly escalate until he notices the staff is starting to vanish very quickly. The facade is breaking the longer he's there. Eventually, it gets to a point where he sees one of the daughters training a servant girl. If done correctly, this section here in the castle could very well actually mirror the novel Dracula by Bram Stoker, or even draw parallels to Carmilla, which there are already some parallels with Lady Dimitrescu and her daughters, but you could definitely draw more parallels to both of those novels through this initial setting of the castle being populated, watching the daughters interact with the servants, and having the castle be more alive than it initially is in the game. Now, during all of this, he's trying to find Rose and leave the castle, and that leads him through most of the same puzzles and chambers, and Ethan finds himself going through the basement, finding the Mordecai, all of those kinds of things. Everything is largely structured the same, but with a populated castle, so he's not just hiding from Lady Dimitrescu, and he's not just avoiding the daughters, he's also avoiding the staff. The staff are not his friends, they're not on his side. They are, at the end, the staff of Castle Dimitrescu. Eventually, things escalate, more of the staff disappear. As you progress through the home, it does eventually lead to you encountering the daughters and having them as mini-bosses. I would make each daughter more unique, keeping them in specific rooms that are significant to the character, changing up the fight mechanics between each one, more close to the library fight rather than the other two. Maybe change up the insects that make them up. Maybe change it from all flies to a fly, a centipede, and something else, maybe a cockroach. Something to vary how they react to things and give them each individual mechanics as well as individual models, styles, dialogue. Let them be significant characters for this section. Comparing the other two to the library fight, that is the reason why Cassandra's the only one who really feels like a mini-boss. In the original game, they are very underutilized. utilized as mini bosses, and they could be done much better. Particularly in the wardrobe, I do like the witchy aesthetic, however, they could have done better with that. I have seen them do better with that. Let us see moments. Give us moments of them interacting with their mother and the serfs. Give us character, give us comment, show us. As you progress, added flashbacks in the castle would also do well. Make it a reaction to the mice seat that's being caused by Evelyn. Let Evelyn have a bit of a bigger role. It would be more interesting than just finding notes and just hoping that you catch the small interactions that happen instead of actual scripted moments of dialogue. Though when it comes to the masks and the statues, swapping some of them out as you progress from marble statues, like the first one being entirely marble, the second one, part of it's been replaced by a plaster casted corpse, where when you pull the mask off, it shows that there's a person underneath it, to an entirely made up of plaster casted corpses that started crumbling, to one that is just bodies. Having one of the daughters have sculpting as a hobby so that the statues make sense and that it adds more to the character in the castle. Let the masks be more of a thing than they are, and have the statues be more of a thing than they are. Make it a daughter's hobby or something they've been doing to conceal the bodies of the people who have gone missing. Even making a moment where the daughter who has been doing the sculpting has a bit of a lash out because she's running out of bodies and her work is decaying and it's bothering her. Make them impactful. Make it interesting. Give us more flavor. Eventually, after the masks are gathered and the daughters have been killed, it's too late to save the staff. Most of them have been eaten, turned into Morokai, all of that. You go through the same steps. Ethan enters the tomb, gets the dagger, starts the boss fight with Lady Dimitrescu. Though here, changing it to add a phase with her in her human form, where the only way to damage her is the dagger, would be interesting. Basically forcing the player to fight head-on in close quarters with a creature that can decapitate you, and adding a timing mechanic where you can cut the claws, the poison delays the growth, making it a timed event where you have to deal so much damage before she shifts into the flesh dragon form. Then you could proceed with the flesh dragon fight, largely the same, knowing that the dagger, it basically saved you ammo in the first round. The second phase with the dragon being a purely firearm phase. As always, once you've gotten dragged to the roof, all of that's done. Ethan kills her, retrieves the crystal remains, as well as the flask. Here is where the Duke comes in, where Ethan takes the crystal remains to the Duke. The Duke convinces him to sell them to him. Ethan, of course, refuses to let him hold the flask. Is told what it contains, has his little freak out moment. Once the remains are sold, they're placed on display on the Duke's cart. Now, this would function as a bit of a trophy shelf, adding a bit of extra collection boost. Selling treasure to the Duke adds to his cart and nets extra bonuses as collections are completed. I just think this would be a neat feature. It's not necessary, but I do feel the Duke is a bit underutilized in how they do his shot progression, and I actually don't like that you can't display the boss remains anywhere because they look freaking cool. Like, Lady D's is my favorite, and they just look sick. Now that the fight is over, Ethan makes his way back to the village, only to have a short moment where he overhears people commenting on the missing castle staff, just before a woman comes fleeing down the road toward Pottersfield. She's sobbing, her daughter's disappeared, she was lured out to the house of Donna by something that she just wasn't able to see, and she hasn't been able to find her. Ethan is, of course, hesitant to help. It's not his kid, but he is sympathetic, and when she mentioned the gardener took something odd into the house, pointing at the flask in Ethan's hands, saying, "It looks like that," he agrees to go. Now, the path to Pottersfield is much the same, twisting, overgrown, leading to House Beneviento. The first altar would no longer be there. The scene where you would walk in and open the gate and the Duke would be there, all of that is just not present. The Duke is in the town, and the altar site is more just a hub to get to the different paths, rather than your actual hub site in the desecrated village at this point. The altar is not there yet, and instead there's just a locked gate leading to the ceremony site, which has been whispered about being where Miranda resides if you've been listening to the villagers as you pass by. Passing through this toward the gate to House Beneviento, Ethan makes his way down the overgrown path to the bridge, past the graves and Pottersfield to reach the garden and the gardener. Occasionally, Ethan would remark on the creepiness, the general vibe as he goes. Usually this is where he would see Mia, but not in this rendition. Reaching the garden, here he encounters the gardener, who is a kind old man, and Ethan feels oddly comfortable with him. They speak normally, have a moment, and the gardener requests a few small tasks around the garden while they're talking. This is where Ethan puts away his weapons and is oddly put at ease by the old man. This garden, of course, is very green, very lush, despite the winter cold and snow surrounding them. The area is almost sunny and warm. As he completes tasks, things just seem to get more warm and inviting until the old man says he's been very helpful and with a smile offers to take Ethan to speak with Donna. As all this has been going on, snow has been slowly melting away. Every time Ethan turns around, it's just more pretty and inviting, and the old man just feels so kind. So of course, Ethan follows the man down the path toward the dollhouse. As you're going, perspective changes. Ethan is lower to the ground, and as they reach the large grave, we realize that Ethan is now a child. The gardener takes him up a nostalgia-filled vision of the elevator, one that is clean and well-kept, not at all decrepit or gross, taking Ethan to the main house, which all looks very dreamlike, where he finds a young girl version of Donna as he opens the door. Here, this tiny version of Donna is holding a repaired, normal-looking version of Angie, and the rest of this section involves Ethan going through several games, solving puzzles, getting to know Donna as a child. In doing so, he has forgotten why he came here. He's forgotten that he was searching for something, and he just thinks he's on a play date. He sees Donna as a playmate, and as he goes through her games, it gives us more insight into the little girl that she was. In his childlike mind, Ethan befriends her. Eventually, though, something pulls him out of the haze. Maybe it's a baby doll, or he stares at a rose. Something cracks the facade. And when Donna calls him for a tea party, perhaps a flash of Evie drawing his attention to that object as she refuses to let Ethan get trapped by another monster. Because, of course, we know now he's her vessel. But this particular moment of Evie showing up would definitely throw Ethan out of whatever he's in. It snaps him out of the fog, and his vision flits between the childlike dream and the adult world. Slowly, he realizes the horror around him. Donna, of course, at the loss of her playmate, is very upset, draws Donna to tears. Angie gets angry because, of course, he made Donna cry, and then knocks him out. You get a brief moment of him getting dragged to the basement as he's flitting between consciousness, and then that's where you go through the normal dollhouse puzzles. A few added laments from Donna and jabs from Angie because, of course, they're upset now. And through this section, again, it's largely the same. You have the doll, you have all the dissection, you have the freaky fetus monster. Eventually, all of that goes through normally, and he ends up back on the first floor for one final game. This is still hide and seek, however, there would be more difficult hiding spots. Also adding in a mechanic that requires you to gather items for a tea party to set the table for tea. Have the other dolls actually be a threat, not just around. There's a moment in that scene whenever you exit the basement where they all come to life, real freaky. Utilize that. You have it, you don't utilize it, you don't do anything with it. They never attack you, they never follow you, they're just there, and it takes you about 30 seconds to beat that section. Just a little more. Give us a little more. But again, this game is largely the same. The ending plays out largely the same. There's a little extra mechanic. The timer puts a little pressure on you to hurry. Once the scene is set, the end of the fight plays out much the same. He attacks Angie, but finds out he has stabbed Donna. This, however, would have a different impact because now Donna has been established as a friend. So it's not just Ethan killing a monster, it's Ethan killing someone who could have been a friend and holding her as she dies. Holding her as her body crumbles into crystals, then sadly wondering if they really could have been friends in another time, if things were different, or if it was just the spores. I should make a note here that in the original version, Angie and Donna are very much the same person. Angie is not an external person, she is Donna's more or less avatar for the things she actually wants to say and the way she actually wants to act. Though in this rewritten version, they would be more separate pieces. Angie is less of an avatar of what Donna wants to be and more of the niggling pieces of herself she doesn't really care for that tend to lose her friends. So while Angie is still very trickstery and angry and defensive and loud, she's not Donna's true personality. Donna is still largely the quiet, soft-spoken, sweet person, but very corrupted by everything that has happened up to this point with her. And the part of them being like friends as children, is Ethan seeing the parts of Donna that have largely been shunted aside in favor of Angie and the necessities brought on by the situation with Miranda. As always, he takes her crystal remains. Here I would give her her own remains as well as Angie, and then he leaves, goes back down to the garden, only to find the gardener has crystallized as well, dead in a chair in the most beautiful spot in the garden, which is now cold and dead as it always was. The flask is in his lap, clean, wrapped, waiting for Ethan with a note of thanks for giving his lady peace. Here he takes his final treasure and makes his way back to Potter's Field. Here is where I would make one big mechanical change. Leaving Potter's Field, you're met with what are called vampires. They're just Morokai without the drapes. I'd switch those out for some kind of plant-specific bioweapon that more closely mimics Donna's powers, instead of the simplified vampire designs. Leaving Potter's Field, he finds the Duke, now at the empty altar site. This is where Duke's spot becomes a hub. Again, he gives the remains to Duke. They're displayed. Duke tips him off that the village has been talking about the reservoir, and that he saw something slink through the river with a flask toward the mines. The village has been keeping an eye on the Lord since Ethan has been such a help and has given them some hope about being free from the evil surrounding them. As the Duke is telling this, Luisa and Elena bring him some meat and echo the sentiment about Ethan being a help. This moment, however, unlocks the cooking function, as well as Elena telling the Duke that his packages have arrived at the far end of the river, and that someone would bring them by shortly. This would be better weapons available after the reservoir, and when they leave, the Duke gives Ethan the tip about hidden treasures. This is where the map gets marked up and his goal is set as he turns his path towards the reservoir. Heading into the reservoir in much the same way, though he is warned as he leaves that they have had to stop fishing due to monsters in the water, we start this section much the same. Ethan going down to the mines, finding the flask, talking way too much with Moreau, but as he's slipping out of the goop, his path leads him from the mines to a lab. The rock giving way to cold, familiar sterility of Umbrella Labs and similar scenes. This would be an expansion of the small section of the map that is called Moreau's Lab, which is really just an empty building that is at the end of his section. Here instead, we would find Moreau was a lab aide of Miranda, and you would get to see some of the documents or video logs of their relationship as co-workers, adding more to his obsession with his quote-unquote mother. As Ethan treks through the fish's domain, instead of lichens, he's met with swamp monster bioweapons unique to this area, most likely cooked up in the lab by Moreau. This lab has plenty of documents and visual storytelling about Miranda's time in lab work, though it may take Ethan a while to figure out it's her. Here we can learn more about the mold, the cadeau, more about what she wants Rose for. All of this would be applicable later, once the cave is opened up and Ethan sees the roots of the Black God. But for now, he makes his way past the swamp monsters, the failed cadeau creatures, to eventually break his way out into the reservoir itself. This outer section can mostly remain the same, moving around the water, the boss fight. Most of that is fine. I would maybe add one more phase where Moreau is small and jumpy before he turns into the huge fish, but outside of that, overall the last part is fine. Moreau was definitely the most difficult part to write, as unlike the other lords, he's designed to be pathetic, and it doesn't have much to cling to in terms of sympathy. He isn't cool or intimidating, so leaning into that doesn't work. Instead, leaning into the pathetic nature of his attachment to Miranda and expanding on his small hints of science leaning is all I really had to work with on him. After Ethan has cleared the water, opening up the path back to the village, he makes his way back down the river, only to come up and find the village empty at the tail end of the lichen attack. This is where you go through the lichen fights, running into the wolf-like lichen, as well as introducing the hammer-wielding lichen, before Heisenberg steps in, making a claim about how Ethan was left to him, and the lichens retreat. Heisenberg makes a comment on them being mother's pets, establishing the lichens as Miranda's and not as Heisenberg's. The original scene doesn't make this very clear. With Heisenberg leaving, given Ethan the location of the last flask, this is where the village returns to being empty as it is in the beginning of the original version of the game. Here, the path leads Ethan to Luisa's house, where you would have the scene play out with the survivors, changing the dialogue to show more hopelessness of them having put hope in Ethan, but having it shown that he may not have been enough to stop the monsters. They go through the prayer, in search of comfort, the old man turns, and here's where the house burns down. That whole scene with Elena plays out, and the very end, the scene where Ethan has his crash out standing in the window would feel more impactful now that he's actually known these people. They're not just some random people. These are people he had come to try to help. And so now that there's a real connection, having just watched them all burn to death would be far more painful. This is also where you'd have the old man make it out of the flames, and Ethan would see him heading toward the mill. This leads Ethan to the large monstrosity that is in the mill, and your first peek at Heisenberg's creations as he doubles back to the stronghold. The stronghold, I would say, goes about the same. There's no real changes to be made there. Everything leading him to that final flask, that final boss fight, pretty much everything in the stronghold is fine. Now, unlike the castle, House Beneviento, and the village that I felt needed massive changes, or Moreau, who was difficult to actually give any changes for, I don't really have anything to say about Heisenberg's factory. The factory is very well paced and could largely be left alone. One change that could be suggested would be adding multiple foundry locations closer to the mold locations so that you do not have to double back quite as much as you do. Aside from that, this section is very well done, and in fact, Heisenberg's boss fight is my favorite. There's not much I could change about that wouldn't detract from it. I do feel they spent the most time on Heisenberg when it comes to the lords, and I quite like him. Obviously, this leads us to the next part, which is the ending. Now, you might have noticed that I did not mention Chris or the operations bases that Ethan finds along the way, and I've only mentioned the cave once or twice. So before I get into Miranda, let me address the B plot that is Chris. Personally, I don't like Chris, so omitting him entirely wouldn't bother me at all, but I know that Chris is central to the story, so leaving him out would cause some problems. So for Chris and his team, I would largely let them function the same, Ethan stumbling on them as he goes through the village. The only thing I would change is the location that's in the church. I would either change that to be at the end after the village is abandoned, or change it to be in one of the houses that is already abandoned at the start of the game. The rest I would leave, including the lab scene with Mia, though I would add different information to that scene than what was found in the reservoir lab. This brings me back to the ending. I would also leave most of the ending alone. With 8, the last part is the most fun. With the adjustments I've presented, you would only need some small dialogue changes to make all that work. Largely, I think the game is fine. I really enjoyed it. I just felt like the character work was a little lax, and I know Resident Evil isn't really known for its character work, but with Ethan, I feel like they had a good opportunity to go more into the characters, especially with the whole, being dead thing. There's a lot of good options for him to reflect on what all he's done to help, even if he failed. He may be a corpse piloted by a fungus, but he's still a human at his core, and that drives him to try his best for those around him. Ethan is not a perfect person, but he's better than many, and I have respect for him even if I think the man's an idiot. I'd say rest in peace, but we all know he's not going to. Overall, I really enjoyed both games. They have my favorite story and characters, and aside from some refining, they're largely well done. So yeah, that's my retrospective on Resident Evil 7 and 8. Rest in peace, Ethan. You are a moron, but you're my moron. You did your best as a husband and a dad till the end. Now, usually this is where I would be doing my outro and talking about the DLC, saying that at some point in the nearby future I would be playing it, but I didn't have it yet. Or at least that's where this would go at the time I initially recorded everything and started working on this video. However, while I was about halfway through getting everything completed and about ready to post, Steam put the DLC on sale for a price I could actually afford because I am currently broke. So, this next section is going to be my thoughts on the Shadows of Rose DLC. So, playing through Shadows of Rose, I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did. Starting off with the castle, I really enjoyed going through all the previous locations, though I could have skipped the basement portions, honestly, after the first initial section with them. I don't feel like it took too long to backtrack, but I could have done without it. I just don't like those basement levels very much. With the Duke and the Howlers, or whatever they're called, the mold monsters, the Dementor guys, I hate them, but I love them for it. I hate the Duke in that one, but that's a good thing, because he's not supposed to be likable. It was a very interesting section. It was a little longer than I would have liked, but I don't think it took too long, and I definitely doubled back more than I should have. But I like the mechanics, I like the pacing, and I like the story points on that particular section pretty well. It's a little bit of Rose coming into herself as she kind of learns the ropes of things. And then when you get into the dollhouse section, I adore that section. It is everything I wanted out of 8. I do wish they had used more of those mechanics and more of those enemies in the original game. I particularly like the first section where you're having to go through all the puzzles and you're learning more about Rose and what she's dealt with in school and why she's a little antsy to get rid of her powers, because they show us what it is. They don't just tell us. You have to kind of put together what happened to her and why she's so stressed out. I do wish we had gotten flashbacks or something and not just the notes. but I do think for the most part, it was a very well done section. I hate the mannequins, and I love that I hate them because that means they're very well done. They creep me the living fuck out, and I hated that section where I had to run from them. It wasn't a very difficult section, and I think that's a good thing because it is mostly story focused, and it's mostly focused on Rose as a character. On top of that, the section with the dolls toward the end, oh, I love that section. It is everything I wanted out of the dollhouse. It is wonderfully paced. I know some people have some issues with it, but if you take the time to actually like slow down and watch the patterns, you can get through that section fairly easily. I only got hit maybe twice the whole time I went through it, and that's because I rushed. So it was a very well-paced section. It was a very well done game, and I loved every moment of it. It was so much fun. So that dollhouse section was great. I do wish they had utilized those doll enemies in the original game, but they didn't, and that's sad but fine. Like I said earlier, I think a section with them having been in actual danger would have been more interesting than how they were used kind of for just a quick little moment and then never touched again. So I wish they had been more present. But I did like the fight with Evie. I like that we got a little bit more of Evie as a character, and I wish we had more on that. I would love to see a DLC of Evie and Miranda trying to kind of make a mother-daughter relationship work, even though we all know that that's not going to happen. Miranda does see Evie as a bastardized version of her daughter, and Evie isn't focused on anyone but Mia for her mother. So I would love to see a DLC that focused on basically just the villains and like having an interesting dynamic between Miranda and Evie, and then having like Lady D and the others pop up shortly. I wouldn't even say anything long, probably shorter than Shadows of Rose, maybe about half the length, but I'd love to see the dynamic there attempt to play out and then have them all kind of just fuck off apart from each other. It would be an interesting thing, though I doubt we'll ever get anything like that. The ending with Miranda, though, was also very good. I liked going back through the village, seeing the molded versions of Rose. I liked her power upgrade that she got at the end there. I also like being able to go through Miranda's laboratory and kind of see everything that she's been working on while inside the mold, reading all her notes and understanding like kind of what's going on. I hated but loved seeing where all the husks were coming from, and I loved the final fight. The final fight was very fun. The mechanics were very fun. I like watching Rose be a badass. Her dodge technique is actually my favorite because she just kind of sidesteps, and I think that's cool. I also like that they added in a way for if you didn't have enough of the like herbs that restored your power, you could just absorb her fireballs there. I thought that was a cool mechanic because I was worried going in that I didn't have enough, and I was able to get most of it from the fireballs without ever using my items. So I thought that was a pretty cool mechanic in the way they did it. I like that we got a closer up fight with Miranda that actually was decently paced. I definitely am bad at mechanics, so it took longer for me to fight her, but I don't think that's a bad thing on the game. I'm just bad at games. But I also love that we got more from Ethan in this one. We got more moments between him and Rose. We got to see what kind of father he would have been if he had been allowed to be that kind of dad, and just all of that like heartfelt dialogue between the two of them. My only complaint with the whole thing, we still didn't see his face. We did not see his face the entire game. Not once, because they used every freaking shot of his face. They used everything they could to cover most of it up. Now, we do know what his face looks like because his model obviously has a face and we can see it now, but I really wish that last cutscene, they zoom in on her face. I really wish they had just flipped it around and give us an Ethan face reveal in the game before cutting to like her waking up. I think that would have been a good moment, but we didn't get that, and that's fine. But man, you missed the mark there. But overall, the DLC was amazing. I loved it. It was great. I really have no complaints on it. The pacing was good. The characters were good. The character work was great. My only complaint is I wish we got flashbacks of Rose's past, but I can understand with a DLC that not being a main focus. But for the most part, I have no complaints on it. The DLC is exactly what I wanted from the main game, and my only complaint is we didn't get more stuff like that. I wish we had more character work like that for Ethan and Mia. I wish we had more of what we had in the Shadows of Rose DLC in the main game. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the DLC. It was great. I can't wait to play 9. Well, after taking way too long to finish it, this has been my retrospective on Resident Evil 7, 8, and the Shadows of Rose DLC. It took me way too long to get back to making videos. I do actually want to do another run through of 8 on the channel since I actually didn't finish my first one. I noticed in the extra content shop there is a lightsaber, so I'm debating doing a run with that just because I think it would be funny. I like the melee weapons. I'm weird like that. You know, I have a few other videos in the works, so keep an eye out for those. Stay safe, kids. Drink your water. And if anybody likes my stuff and wants to see more of it, there's links in all of the normal places. I have a Patreon. There's Tumblr. I have a Toy House. You can find stuff I've written, artwork I've done on the Tumblr, and you can find character adopts I have available out on the Toy House if anybody does Toy House. There's also some STLs I have available up on my Patreon, just cute little stuff to print out. If you like Littlest Pet Shops, I have a bunch of those that I've made. So yeah, not a whole lot more to say. I guess that wraps everything up. I love 7, I love 8. I wish they had given us more of what we got in the Rose DLC, but I'm glad we got what we did, and I'm looking forward to having 9 as soon as I'm able to do so, and I do plan to record that. I plan to re-record 7 and 8 because I think they're fun, and then keep an eye out. There'll be more shortly. So I guess that's everything, so bye.